Hey, welcome or welcome back if you're a regular listener. Thanks for being here. Today, I want to talk about the quiet fears and the stories we tell ourselves when we're considering starting a solopreneur practice. Whether we're still working for a business and we just are like kind of have that itch, like, I've always wanted to start my own business and do my own thing and hang out my own shingle, as the cliche goes. Or it's someone who has been recently let go and they're kind of at that crossroads where they're trying to decide, is this the time for me to start my own business? So let's go ahead and talk about those fears in this episode. Welcome to My Solopreneur Life. I'm Terry Pappy, your gracious host, and I am so glad you're here. I have a wonderful episode for you. Sit back, relax, and let's have some real talk about what it is to be a solopreneur. I was just so eager to get started. That's why my intro is so short. Usually I blather on a little bit, but this is a really not frequently discussed part of being a solopreneur. And also why I dedicated my second season all about starting and the things that come up there. So if you haven't listened to the episodes in season 2, those are the shows that start with 2, 201, 202, and so on. I want you to really go back and look at some of the titles and listen to the ones that resonate with you. I'm telling you, starting really isn't talked about in the way I want to talk about it. And there are a lot of fears and unknowns that happen when you're considering starting your own solopreneur business. As a solo operator, whether down the road you decide you want to scale up and hire people and build a team and build a bigger business, that's entirely up to you. But in the beginning, it's usually a solo operation that's just you going out there and kind of figuring it out, laying the land for how you want to work, the audience that you want to go after, how you want to communicate, how you want to prospect and bring in new clients and so on. There's kind of 2 scenarios that these fears can come into play. I can't exhaust the wide array of fears, but what I can do is offer you the idea or some prompts that help you look at how you're thinking about your business from the perspective of what are you nervous about? What are you unsure about? What is a belief system that might be driving fears? And we'll talk about some of that. The 2 scenarios would be, one being you're still working a full-time job. Maybe you've been saving up because you've been planning on starting your own business, but you haven't necessarily pulled the trigger. There could be many different reasons for waiting. It could be the economy. It could be situations in your personal life, such as family caregiving or a spouse that maybe isn't working or whatever the situation is. Or you may not have saved up enough to give you the financial safety net that you may need to get the business ramped up where you're starting to earn reliable, steady income and you've got a good pipeline. Whatever the situation is, that right there can generate some fears. The first thing I want to suggest is take a look at the pragmatic side of starting the business for scenario 1, which is you're still working. So you still have income, you still have benefits, you still have that security, that brand in whatever company you're working with. You've built a network of people, relationships professionally. They know you for doing a certain thing. That's one scenario. Make sure that you're taking care of those pragmatic things so you don't get out there on your own and then 6 months down the line, you still haven't really figured out the income or the client or how to fill your pipeline. You're going to be a little nervous and the fears will build. They'll get even bigger and they'll kind of take over your life. That's one scenario in the beginning, the very basic stuff, but we're going to get to the hairy, ugly stuff too. The second scenario is you just got notice and you've been laid off and your last day is this Friday. And you're like, holy crap, I wasn't prepared for this. That's where you make the decision, okay, am I moving just into another job? Do I just want to replace this with another job? Or is this the universe giving me a sign that it's time for me to start my own thing because I've always wanted to? Or I've worked in the corporate jungle for long enough and I'm ready to try doing my own thing. And I have the things in place in my life, similar to scenario one, where I'm stable enough, I have enough money in the bank, or the kids are off to college, that's all taken care of, or whatever the situation is. You don't have those external pressures that are feeding the fears around the financial and the pragmatic side of starting your own business. I remember when there have been several times where I've tried to start my own business and failed. The first one was, and this is funny, I don't even know if I talked about this in my first season. The first one was called Archive Graphics. And this was back in the 90s. And it was right around the time when Adobe Acrobat was coming out and there were PDFs and all of this stuff. And Archive Graphics, and I can't even remember all the specifics, but I was trying to start a service business where I would take and organize people's content or files or graphics or whatever it was file-wise, and I'd create like an archive for them. So about the same time, maybe even just later that year, Adobe came out with these new software things and cloud services started to surface. And all of a sudden I found myself choosing something because I was such a good organizer and I loved working on the computer. It just made sense to me, even though, I was still early in the web design and all that because it hadn't really taken shape yet. The computer stuff was just really starting to grow and like get mass adoption and all that was going on. And I was just like, oh, I can do this, right? So I barely got started, never got a client, but I had all these great ideas and I set everything up. I designed my own little logo and I was like ready to go. And then Adobe comes out with all this stuff and it just totally blew my whole idea. I was like, why would I do this and get paid for it when Adobe's doing it at scale? So that was one of my very early attempts. And I know there were others that I tried to do. I remember when I published my Compass Playbook, which is a creative brainstorming workbook. And a companion book I have as well. And I'm just laughing because it's so silly looking back on it. Because here's the deal. I don't have a lot of business experience. Yes, I have entrepreneurial spirit and I was raised by a family that had a lot of entrepreneurs and solo operators in it. But I didn't have a clue. I was just really good at an array of things in the creative space, in the communication space. And I just had this strong desire to be independent, to carve my own path. And I know that there are people out there like that start their own businesses because they have that energy. But here's the thing, that's great to have that because it will sustain you to a point because it's kind of passion-led. But it's your skills and experience and dedication to really run a business that makes the business truly last. When I was laid off of my corporate job with Marriott, and I've talked about this probably a little too much, if you've been a regular listener, I apologize for going back and talking about this again, but it is my story and I'm sticking to it. But when I was laid off Marriott, that came as a shock. It was, again, a year and a half after Chuck had passed away, and I had 2 mortgages on my house, and it couldn't have been the worst time, but yet it was the best time because I was in a desperate mentality. My emotional state was just nothing but the depths of grief. I was holding on to that job like a life raft, not just the income, but having something to do because I went from caregiving of my husband for 6 years as he dealt with cancer to nothing. And that's all I had. It was a mental shock for me. And then when I got laid off a year and a half after he passed away, I truly did have nothing, meaning no family to take care of, like no kids, I had a dog. That was it. Thank God for that dog. And so my brain was not in a space of like, hey, let's start a business. And I was filled with nothing but fear because income had become like a life raft for me because I wanted to remain independent. I wanted to support myself. And I just wanted to have that freedom of making my own decisions and carving out my journey professionally. So when I got laid off, I immediately tried to find another job, could not find another job. Weird time in the economy. I was a hot mess anyway, so who would hire me? So, I mean, looking back on it, I'm like, how did I even make it through that period of my life from the standpoint of making decisions about a business? And that's often how it is when we start our solo business, become a solopreneur, because we often do what we did in our corporate job. I find that time and time again with a lot of my clients is they did X in their corporate job, and the natural thing is to keep doing X in their solopreneur practice because they've got the relationships, they've got the brand. People know them for being that and doing that. And so that's the first place they're going to find new business. I know it was for me because it was people at Marriott that knew that I ran the web team and designed websites and lived in that world. So when they were ready to start their business, they reached out to me because they knew me, they had a relationship, and they knew what I did, and they knew I had integrity and I would get it done. And that's how I got some of my early clients. And I'm forever grateful for that. But as I said, I was a hot mess back then, absolute hot mess. To even touch on fears. The fears that I had were various, and they came from a lot of different directions, personally, obviously, professionally. And I'd build any website. I'd work for any client who needed a website or a logo or anything graphical, anything in print. And I would just go ahead and do that stuff. And it was like, okay, I got to get clients. I'll just be a freelancer, So I was all over the place when it came to starting my business. Now I'm just in the messy middle, getting ready to start my third decade as a solopreneur. To many degrees, it has worked out. And I guess the advice that I'm offering through the podcast and through what I write in my articles, my newsletter, and things on LinkedIn, essentially is just to help you see that it's okay to have fears about what you're doing and having your own business. It's okay to be fearful about income. It's okay to be fearful about competitiveness and making your brand stand out in what I refer to as a sea of sameness, especially as there are more and more solopreneurs out there scratching for work. And on the surface, it looks highly competitive. But the beautiful thing about being a solopreneur is you can be as specialized, and I highly recommend it as well, highly specialized in your area of what problem you solve. And I get into a lot of details around how to communicate that and whatnot. But I really want to just talk about, especially in this season, some of the things we don't talk about. So let me bring it back to the kind of fear thing. And there's a couple of key fears in the beginning around starting, whether you have started or you're considering it. Remember, there's two scenarios. One, you're still working. One, you just got laid off. Two completely different mentalities where you're considering doing your own business. And fear number one is, what if I'm not ready? And that's very, very common with solopreneurs because we've never been a solopreneur before. Now, like me, you may have tried it and failed, which is another fear, by the way, but we'll get to that one. And I laugh at some of the stupid things that I did, I swear to God. I'm just amazed that I've been able to build the business that I've built so far. And I've been very restrictive about the size of my business because I want to have a lot of freedom and flexibility in not only who I work with, but the amount, the volume of what I do. And I will be the first to confess there are so many different things that I could be doing in my own business that could be more efficient, more focused, and drive more revenue. Not necessarily taking on the heavy weight of the one-on-one high-touch client relationships that I currently have, which I adore, by the way. When you have a fear of, what if I'm not ready? Like a conversation in your head, like, what if I'm not ready? Oh, I need to take a business course. Oh, I need to have a business plan. Oh, I need to have all these things. And we get in this kind of operator mode where we feel that having these things in place is what's going to make us successful. And that's not really truthful. It disguises itself as practical planning. Like, I'm going to have these things that guarantees my success. No, it doesn't. It makes you feel like you're ready. It makes you feel that you have a legitimate outline or scope of what you want to do, which could also be translated as, this will guarantee my success. And that's not true. The crazy thing about being a solopreneur is you really never are ready. You just kind of fly by the seat of your pants and learn about building your business by just doing the business, doing the work, talking to people. I remember when I started mine, I called it Terry Pappy Creative Services because I looked at myself as a freelancer. And even though on the surface, that's just what I felt comfortable doing, felt like an easy translation, like people get it, oh, I'll just hire a freelancer to do this. But it became very transactional, very project-based, meaning I wasn't able to build the relationship and really learn about my client and their business like I wanted to. It took me the first probably 5 years to figure out that the way I work and how I bring very key strengths to the table, meaning I love to understand somebody's business, so I'm a great qualifying interviewer. I can interview people, I can talk to them, I can inquire, and that's a big component of the work that I do because I want to get to the heart of the matter. I realized that there was this pattern showing up of people not understanding who their customer was, being very unprofessional in their communications, inconsistent, and they had nothing in place to create a customer experience that encouraged referrals. Those three components, that pattern that I kept seeing over and over again, helped me redefine and create the brand that is today, which is Better 3. And everything I do comes out of those three areas: my products, my approach, the way I deliver my services, and the way I encourage my clients, who are also, in many cases, solopreneurs, structure their businesses as well. As you're thinking that, okay, I'm not ready, I got to do all these things, just get that being not ready and just kind of being okay with that, right? Because it's normal to never feel that you're ready. So let's talk about the fear number 2. And this is common with every single solopreneur that's out there, that at least that I've encountered. And that is, what if people think I'm a fraud? That's the whole, I'm not good enough, I don't have a reputation as a solopreneur, this is my business, I don't have all the support and resources of a big company. Are people going to look at me as like a freelancer, kind of like how I was presenting myself when I first started my business? The internal voice that says, who am I to do this? The questioning and the self-doubt that comes up when you're out there in the early years or thinking about getting out there and starting your own business is very common. And it gets louder and louder right before you start, right before you pull the trigger. And everyone feels this way. Even people who on the surface look confident or have years and years of experience. And believe me, I talk to so many, and I've had many clients that come to me and they're just looking for the tactical solution. But what they don't realize that they have all these stories going on, these fears going on, and we unpack that stuff and we get it out of the way and say, listen, it's okay. What you need to do is be in action. And that's usually the antidote for a lot of fears. Okay, so the third fear is, and this is kind of tied into the second one, what if I fail and then everyone sees it? And I experienced this because there was this period, I would say in my first decade, and I remember there was this period where I hadn't quite figured out my pipeline. I hadn't quite figured out how to create a steady stream of client work to keep my income at the level I needed to live, to survive. And I was doing everything myself, so my expenses were relatively low other than my personal expenses. What I remember doing is I connected with a recruiter who I knew from prior jobs I had gotten. And I said, listen, I didn't want to give up on my business, but I needed a gap filler. I needed something to do. And I worked with him and I said, can you get me like a contract doing some web stuff? And I remember I got a short contract to work on transitioning a whole website environment with a bunch of developers working on the GUI, meaning the graphical user interface or the cascading style sheets. In other words, how the site looked and rendered and everything for AAA, for the American Automobile Association, which was in Lake Mary, Florida. And I remember it was weird because I felt like I had a full-time job again. And I would go in the morning and I'd clock in and sit in the cubicle city and work with the developers and just sit there and program all day. But I was paid hourly as a contractor, as a 1099, and it was a great gap filler. And I did it for, I think, about 3 months. And so it gave me income. It was good for that purpose. But at the end of that stint, they liked my work so much, they offered me a full-time spot at the company. It was tempting, believe me, it was really tempting, but I didn't want to give up on my business. I had gotten a taste of the solopreneur life, and I really loved it. As I had said earlier, I wanted a business that gave me a lot of freedom, that gave me that stretch where I could basically run the day how I wanted to run it and do the work that I really enjoyed doing. And the best way to do that was to have my own business. I remember I wasn't really keen on the culture they had there. And I don't know if that was really because I had been doing my own stuff for so many years that I kind of got spoiled because I did have all that freedom and I had that, run my day the way I wanted to, and I could come and go. And I felt like I was kind of back in this corporate kind of situation that wasn't really flexible or fun and I think that was probably at the heart of most of it, but the culture was very much not a fit for me. And I think that's what I ended up deciding, that just really wasn't going to make me happy. I mean, at the end of the day, it's about being happy with what you're doing. And with so many opportunities to do whatever in today's economy and the world, and it's okay to say no to those opportunities when they come up. And that was a situation where I was faced with that fear of like, I'm going to fail at running my own business. I have to go and find like more traditional work in a non-traditional way. I had a lot of doubts. And like I said, it was very tempting to go to work for AAA full time and kind of give up or sideline my business. So every situation is okay, and it's going to give you pros and cons. And when you're looking at being a solopreneur, if you end up taking these deviations or these detours, it's okay. Don't make yourself wrong for doing that. Don't lock yourself into, I'm either this or I'm either that. Live in the gray a little bit. Allow the environment with which you're providing service, finding solutions for your clients, to be flexible until you find that groove where you kind of settle into a groove where you're like, I really love doing X, and I'm just going to get so good at doing X. I want to be known for doing X, and I want everybody to talk about how awesome I am at doing X, and so on. And that's really where you want to go. When you look at that third fear around what if I fail and everyone sees it, this is a visibility fear. It's not just about failing, but failing publicly, which is really kind of a projection, into the public. And solopreneurship makes this worse because you are the brand, right? It can have the personal connotation to it where it's like, it's me that failed. Like I am a failure, not just my business effort was a failure, because people associate the person with that business. You are the brand when you're a solopreneur. The key there is you have to reframe it. What if people can see your honest effort as really the point? Like, what did you do in the time that the pre-fail time, when you were successful, when you were doing the work, when you were, exploring that as an opportunity. It's not necessarily about the failure. It's all in the story and how big we make it in our heads and what that means. Like what we make that mean is so critical. So here are a few prompts that I want to give you. These are things that will actually help. And whether the 3 fears that I listed here as examples are something you're experiencing, because remember, this is about starting either before you start, whether you're scenario 1, still working, or scenario 2, you've been laid off and you're thinking about it, because these fears can happen at any point, right? Remember my stories. The first thing I want you to consider doing as a prompt is name the fear out loud. This is something that I did when my husband was going through his cancer, and there were so many unknowns. We'd go to a doctor, they'd give us news. Most of it was bad, some of it was good. The part that was good was like, okay, here's our plan. We're going to go do this treatment, we're going to do radiation, or we're going to do chemo, or we're going to do this. One of the ways that I tried to cope as a caregiver, very emotionally tied to how Chuck was feeling, what we were doing, being in action, and so on, was I journal a lot. And I would write, and this kind of helped diffuse. And I did this a lot even after he passed away because I was very deep in grief and confused. And of course, then I got laid off. And so all these things were happening to me. And I was having a hard time. There's an internal conversation that happens all the time for all of us. That's what it is to be a human being. But what I would do is I would journal the full scenario. So if I had a fear, like I remember when he was still alive, my number one fear was he's going to die. And then what? How am I going to survive? What am I going to do? Am I going to be alone the rest of my life kind of thing? I would write like, okay, so if that happens, then what? Well, I could do this, I could do that. And I kind of laid it out. And I think that it's a great way to diffuse any fear. At least it was for me, because what it did was it gave me proof that there's an out, there's a solution, there's a pathway or multiple pathways, and I can basically do whatever. Very often when we get hung up on a fear, we stop at the fear, and like that fear just kind of has me paralyzed. And that is one thing that I used to do. Naming the fear out loud, write it down, say it, share it with a good friend that you know they won't judge you or give you grief about it or tease you about it. It's something that you can even break it down into smaller components. Start with one conversation, one post, one outreach. These are all things that you can do. You don't have to model yourself after someone who's done it really successfully. You don't have to follow a certain course or regimen or model that you've maybe invested in, like this is how you start your business, or your business plan for that matter. But expect that fear to come back. It doesn't go away when you just start. It just means you're doing something that matters. And that's really important. You want to do these things according to what weight that fear has as far as a distraction, talking it through, doing like what I did with Chuck. I just journal out the whole scenario. Okay, so if this happens, what could I do? And then just write a bunch of things. I could do this. I could do that. I mean, look at the example I gave working for AAA for a couple of months. It helped close that gap, gave me some income, gave me some confidence that, yeah, I'm on the right track with this business. I'm not going to go back to work full time. Remember, the beauty of being a solopreneur is you have access to what's really going on inside your mind, and you can make the choices to adjust and reframe your mindset so those fears don't take over your true desire to have your own business, to have the freedom to make the choices that you want to make as a solo operator and create a beautiful thing that you're solving problems for people and businesses, that you're out there in the world talking about the work you do, celebrating the work that you're accomplishing with your clients, and that you're free to mold it and shape it and grow it however you want to grow it. And that's one of the great things about being a solopreneur. So don't let these fears stop you. Bring them in as important safeguards to stay in touch with what's really going on inside and realizing that there's nothing perfect that's necessary about being a solopreneur. And if you screw up, and you will screw up, believe me, I've got some of that coming at you too. It's okay because you're doing your own thing and it's all you, baby. So keep at it. Well, I know you're disappointed, but that's it for this episode. Listen, the great news is there's another one coming, so stay tuned. Anyway, I just want to make sure that you do the prompt. If this episode had a prompt, and you get that homework done because you're going to be a better solopreneur. How's that for a maternal finger shaking at you? Hey, listen, thanks so much for being here, for giving me time of your day, and, for taking it on. So if you want to learn more and stay connected with me, just head on over to mysolopreneurlife.com. Thanks a bunch. See you soon. That was pretty good. I think I'll keep that one.